Right, it's my job to tell you guys today all about the Inspire range of feeder rods. Now, I think whenever you're tuning in to watch a video that is talking about rods, you want to know the key information, what rods are available, and of course what price range they are. That's what I'd want to know if I was looking about rods. So I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about that today and tell you why and where you might want to use these rods in your fishing, because I'm really happy with these rods. In fact, I'm more than happy. I'm proud of the rods because we spend a long time at Preston looking at rods and studying different actions. I've been in so many product meetings now when we've literally got ranges and different shapes and sizes and strengths of rods, weighing different sections, understanding which bits work in which way, and that means we can bring you all that information centralized into a really good set of fishing rods. First of all, I want to address what is often the elephant in the room when you're talking about any product, and that's the price. Now, these are not 500 quid fishing rods, so you don't have to be scared off if that's what you're worried about. These are a fishing rod that are in the lower price range when it comes to sets of fishing rod range. They're around 100 to 150 pounds. All right, they vary in different prices. The RRPs are there. Tackle shops are going to put them out there for you guys to sell. So that's what you're looking at when you're looking at these rods. I also want to tell you that these are rods that I use in my fishing, okay? So I don't want you to think, oh, he's just talking about a rod here and he's going to use a 500 pound rod. I don't do that. I like to design and be part of fishing tackle that I can then go and use on the bank. I absolutely loved Inceptions, and they're rods that I was using up until we started to get the samples of these because they were a brilliant fishing rod. So I want a rod that works fantastically well, catches me a lot of fish, and these Inspire feeder rods are going to do just that. So first of all, why are they a step up from the previous rods that were in this price bracket? Well, we're really fortunate at Preston that we work really hard with different rod suppliers and different suppliers of carbon fibre, and we're always pushing them. We're always trying to get better quality materials, better quality components when we put the rods together. And you would honestly be shocked if you knew how high a standard these Inspires are. We're working with a supplier at the moment who is putting some brilliant products together to our specifications, back and forth. I want you guys to understand how much effort goes into these rods, and the carbon fibre in this is really good quality, very good. So we're really proud that we can bring you these rods in this price bracket. Now, first of all, let's talk about the components of the rods, and then let's look at the range. So what makes them so good? When you're looking and talking about a feeder rod, okay, for me, there are two fundamental things that I need to think about. One is the casting. Where am I going to cast? How far am I going to cast? And how heavy a feeder am I planning to cast? They are all the considerations that I need to put into place when I'm choosing a feeder rod. If I'm chucking a 100 gram feeder 20 meters on the River Trent, I'm still not going to be using a little soft 10-foot rod. Probably going to want a heavier, stronger rod. But I might not want, say, a really long rod. So I might go for a 12-foot Monster Extreme in that scenario, a shorter rod that's got a bit more grunt. These rods are designed for fishing with feeders from, I'm going to say, 15 to about 90 grams. That's what you're looking for, and that is balanced as you go up the length of the rod. So this rod that I've got in my hand here, which is the 12-foot, we put a recommended casting weight on the rod of around about 60 grams. That means I wouldn't really want to be pushing too much heavier than that, although I have used 90 grams on this rod, but obviously not for the big chuck. Whenever you get a casting weight, it's just a guide. Right, it's a guide for you guys to understand what this rod can take. So this 12-foot rod is brilliant for feeders from 30 gram up to about 70-75 gram, depending on how far you want to cast them. If you want to chuck a 30 gram feeder 60 meters, you'll probably be able to do it with this rod because you'll get the action to generate the speed from the lighter feeder. If you want to cast a 75 gram feeder 60-70 meters, you might struggle because the rod will be a bit softer. You'd probably have to step up in rod. So just when you look at the casting weight, just bear in mind that it's going to be in and around that bracket, okay? So all these rods are designed for like mid-range size feeders. That's the first thing I want to get across. When we do the rods, obviously the first thing we always look at the handles. How can we make a really nice handle for you guys? These obviously widened supports are brilliant when you're winding in, playing fish. You've got that support here under your arm, nice flat area, which I think is really comfortable and really important. We also think about the length of the handle. Too long, it's a bit cumbersome. That's more for distance rods. You're trying to balance that length of the handle for casting. We've actually got these like little indentations on the butt, which are great. You almost like feel your fingers like slip into them, if you like, so you can then obviously get a grip and cast. Some people I see casting like this with a rod, don't forget you're trying to hold the bottom of the rod. So this distance changes. This butt length changes on every single rod. This is the 12, like I said. You probably find the 11.4 is about here and the 10.8 is here. And the longer distance rods have got longer handles. We don't just have the same length on every single rod. We've got a fantastic reel seat. With this area in here, we've tried to keep everything to a minimum so it's nice and light. The cork even steps in nice and slim here, and we've got it nice and slim here at the top. And it basically, when you put your reel in, it just twists down there to grip. Really, really nice style of reel seat. It'll go as big as you want for any reel you want, or obviously you can reduce it down if you're using a smaller reel. Grips nice and tight, doesn't let you down. So that's really important. Got a little hook up here. Sometimes people forget the hook up if you want to put your hook on. Obviously keep your rig stored nice and light. Some beautiful graphics and carbon effect here at the bottom for the name with the details of the rod on the back. And then we are using minima guides. Now, they asked me the question, do you want minima guides on the new rods? Absolutely I do. If I can make my rods lighter, then I will do. And these minima style guides will always do that for you because they are a heavy component on a rod. So if we can make them lighter, we will do. All right, that's all the way through the rod, right into the quiver tip as well. So quiver tips with minima guides, really, really nice. They look great when you're fishing. The action of these rods, we tried to follow the same action on all these rods because I believe this is the best feeder fishing rod action. And that is to keep it nice and strong down in this lower section here. So basically when I go to cast, and we've talked about casting as well, when I go to cast, when I cast out, what I want is the strength here to not let me down, to almost catapult and generate the speed in the top end of the rod. It sounds easy. I've seen loads of people try to do it and they don't get it right. They go on for too long, they go on for too short, they don't quite realise how much you might need here. It always varies with every rod, but what it creates is this fantastic action, which basically means you've got a strong bit here, but if you want to use a 20 gram feeder, this bit of the rod is probably where the cast will come from, because obviously it's a lot softer. It doesn't stay strong for so long, so it basically starts to get softer and softer as you go up the rod. So if I'm casting 20 grams with this feeder, I can have a nice flick and all the action in the top of the rod will cast it. If I want to put 60-70 grams on as I go to cast, this top of the rod almost comes obsolete and all the power gets generated from the lower bit. And we follow that principle throughout this Inspire range. So from the smallest rod to the biggest rod, and like I say, we'll talk about the sizes in a minute, you're going to get that in this rod. It is going to make your casting easier, without a shadow of a doubt. You will be able to punch your feeder nice and firmly, knowing that the rod is not going to let you down, all right? And if you just want to basically lob your feeder, even better still, because you will get, the rod will find its maximum point and help catapult your feeder out there. When we've been out casting with these rods, it's incredible how you can put like 60 gram window feeders on rods like this and really, really punch them hard in windy, horrible conditions, and then swap to a 30 grammer if you need to. So very, very nice. And that actually massively helps the fish playing action, because when you hook a fish, you don't know what fish you're going to hook. So if you hook into a fish and it's 4 ounce skimmer, you need your rod to have forgiveness. What you don't want is a broom handle with a quiver tip in the top. You're trying to get this bit of the rod down here at the lower stages to bend nicely through, all right, and play that fish. And you get that in these rods. So effectively you get a real softness here, and that's also into the tip, which I'll touch on in a minute. And then if you start like playing bream or carp or big tench or whatever it is, you're going to get the power as you go down the rod. Obviously, should you hook a massive fish, you've got the power here. But effectively what happens is when I hook into a fish with these rods, what I've noticed more than ever is I don't get that thud, like almost thudding on my arm as the rod deadens. I don't get that. What I get is the rod taking all the lunges. So I'm almost like holding it still, and the rod is finding its point every time, and it puts less pressure on the hook, and it allows you to play those fish in really efficiently. So by combining the casting action and the playing action, fish playing action, we've actually come up with like this perfect combination, which we've had in a lot of our previous rods, distance masters, etc, etc. So that's why we use it with Inspire, and I'm telling you all about it because it's taken a lot of time and effort to get to that point. So that's what you've got when you get an Inspire rod. I want to talk about the range. We started with a 10-8. So basically these rods were originally created with sort of meters in mind. So they go 3.2 meters, 3.4 meters, 3.6 meters, 3.8 meters, and 4 meters. So basically 20 centimeter intervals. Now, if you're like me and you like to talk in feet and inches when it comes to rods, basically the rods get longer at 8-inch intervals, okay? So we start at the 10-8, which is a lovely length. It's a little bit longer obviously than like a normal 10-foot rod, but it has all those soft characteristics. And you know, like some of the really soft 10-foot rods, we've got like a 10-foot super light, or just a normal 10-foot superior. They're beautiful rods, but they're different in their action, okay? This 10-foot-8 has still got the grunt here. So if I want to put like a 30-gram feeder on and cast it like 25, 30 meters, it's just going to eat it up. But it's ridiculously soft in the top half of the rod. So this sort of rod that's designed for, I'm going to say like skimmers, bream, hybrids, roach, all those sort of species, is actually, as it happens, perfect for F1s and carp and that too, because you get power here at the bottom. But when you hook into the fish and you want to control the fish, you're going to have the power here to do it. So for me, this is a beautiful rod that I just have to carry anywhere where I'm fishing sub 30 meters. This is my length of rod to carry, 10-8. It's a little bit longer than your sort of 9 and 10-foot rods, but when you're on natural venues in particular, having a slightly longer rod is definitely an advantage. Then you've got my absolute favourite in the range, the 11-4. So this is 3.4 meters, so 11 foot 4 inches, that bit longer, and it's got a casting weight of around 40 grams. Now, the action on this rod is very similar to the previous 11-4 Ascension, but obviously with the material improvements without them throughout the rod. And for me, this is just my favourite rod. This is strong enough to cast 45 gram winder feeders, 45 gram method feeders, 45 gram cage feeders, or whatever it is you might want to do, and you can cast them 45 meters if you want, or if you're in a gale and you need to smash it out 30 meters, you can do it. Having this rod in my bag is literally what every single feeder match that I go on, I have the same, and it just gives me a little bit more power. So rather than the 10-8, which is going to bottom me out at around about 30-40 grams if I'm being honest, this is going to absolutely eat up 45 grams. The casting weight is 40 grams. Remember, I told you it's just a guide, all right? So if you want to put like a 50-gram feeder on this rod and cast it 30-40 meters, you will be able to do that because you've still got the power here. But ideally, like today, I've got a 20-gram hex mesh on there. I'm fishing 35 meters. This is the perfect rod for it. Absolutely and utterly perfect. It then moves up, obviously, 20 centimeters to the 12-foot. Now, this is a great rod. I'm going to say, if I was to describe this, it's a perfect like river fishing rod, if I'm being honest, for feeder fishing, and like a mid-distance rod. So anything over 40 meters, like I'm starting to think about this rod. It's got a 60 gram casting weight. It's softer than like a 12-foot Superior. You know, it has the same action. It's softer for longer in the rod, and then you get the power lower down in the rod. So if you're hooking like bream, you've got a beautiful forgiveness within the rod. And literally, we've had these up against all the different rods. We had loads of different samples, just trying to find that perfect bib. You'll see it when you hook into fish. You get a beautiful bend in that top 2/3 of the rod. So this is the rod that I would use for that sort of fishing. And all those 3 rods that I've talked to you about there, they have 2.5 mil quiver tips, and we'll touch on the tips in a minute, but they have 2.5 mil quiver tips. Then it steps up in quiver tip because we're looking at the more distancey style rods. Now, I'm a massive fan of like distance style rods. We've got some brilliant ones in the range at Preston Innovations, but when you do a distance rod and a really high quality one, you are talking about that little bit of extra money. So if you want to do some distance fishing and have a more reasonably priced rod, that was the challenge that we set out to achieve with this. Unfortunately, because we've got such good materials and the minima guides, we've done it. So this is the 12.8, sorry, 12.6 on here, this one is, and 3.8 meters. Now for me, this rod is going to be for your sort of like 60 to 75 meter distance casting, which those of you out there who like a bit of distance casting but don't do it very often, this is going to be the rod for you. It's very, very strong here. Again, it's forgiving in the tip, but we've stepped up the tips to 3.5 mil. So whenever you do a distance rod, you need that thickness here, because your quiver tip has to react quicker. When you start casting at distance, what you don't want is a big bouncy quiver tip. You need a quiver tip that reacts really quickly, and that stops you getting crack offs, that allows you to hit the distances with accuracy a lot better, and effectively a fishing rod that is designed for fishing at distance. I would use this rod for big heavy feeders on the rivers, or if I was fishing 60 meters or more with feeders over 60 gram. Casting weight on this is 80 gram. I wouldn't even consider putting a feeder on this less than 60 gram because you won't compress it enough to cast it far enough. So if you want a nice big strongish distance rod but not too long, this is going to be the one. And then we've got the big boy, the Bruiser. This rod is 13.2 and it's 4 meters, 120 grams. This is if you are going 75 meters and beyond. For me, if I'm going to do some big casting and I'm going to be using heavier feeders, this is the rod I'm going to be using. If I'm putting feeders on like 90 gram winder feeders, 80 gram winder feeders, and I'm casting in very, very strong windy conditions, say 65, 70 meters, this is the sort of rod I would use. Everything that bosses the situation. The handle's longer. The rod is a lot stronger for longer. You're not even going to get any real bend until this sort of point. You will, but my point is when you're playing a fish. But when you're casting, you need the power for longer. And trust me, I've smashed this rod well over 100 meters lots of times. So I'm really confident that if you want to do some distance fishing with heavy feeders, or if you guys are watching this in Europe for your big deep lakes and you want heavier feeders, this is going to be the rod for you at the top end of the range. The final point I want to touch on when it comes to Inspire rods is the quiver tips. Now the quiver tips in these rods are completely different to the quiver tips in like the Superior style rods. They too are 2.5 mil, but a Superior style rod gives you a quiver tip that basically what we call is fast taper. So it will bend at the top like this, if I bend it like this, and then it will get stronger quicker. So if I was to exaggerate the action, it's more like that than it is through action. With the Inspire range, these are designed for reading the bite fully along the tip. So basically the tip stays softer for longer. So they bend softer for longer. So when you get a bite, rather than getting like your bite that's doing this at the end, you get a bite that goes like this, and it's less pressure on the fish as the bite develops and you can pick up into the fish. Perfect for braid fishing, like literally perfect for fishing with braid. I use these tips in a lot of my rods, and a lot of the time, if I am fishing with braid with my superiors, I will change to these tips because I know how good they are for reading the bites. And now they come with minima guides. They're super light. They're just touched with paint on the end. They are a fantastic quiver tip. So that is something I would really look at. They start at ½ an ounce and go all the way up, obviously, to 2 ounce in the 2.5. And then you've got your stronger ones in your distance rod. So if you want some really sensitive through action quiver tips, that then the rod action starts from about here. You can see, look how much the bend is, like an even bend if you like, and then you're into the action of the rod. These are fantastic for reading your bites, and if you can read your bites, you will catch more fish. I think that if I was looking for some new feeder rods, if I was looking to upgrade my feeder rods, and I loved my natural open water venues, I wouldn't be able to look past these Inspire rods. They are too good to miss. If I was on a commercial venue and I was chucking slightly heavier feeders that little bit further, then these are a definite look at, because you know, I've seen a lot of people that go to these lakes where they're trying to cast a bit further and they try and force their like 10-foot beautiful superior to do that. You're not going to do it, all right? You're just not going to do it. So try and come over to the Inspires, have a look, because it might be a rod you can add to your bag that'll do it. A fantastic set of rods. I hope you've enjoyed the detail and the thought process of how these are made, and obviously we'll catch you next time.